Hello and welcome to Baobab Chats, a platform where we come together as Africans from all over the world to discuss various issues that are affecting us. From time to time, we also bring Africans across the globe who are doing phenomenal work and who are making an impact in the worlds in which they live in. Today, we are joined by a renowned lawyer in Zimbabwe, Doug Coltart. Doug, welcome to Baobab Chats.
Thanks for having me, Stan. It's good to be here. I'm a young African who really believes in the potential for our continent and to work together to really develop. Of course, I'm a Zimbabwean as well, proudly Zimbabwean. Professionally, I'm a lawyer. I work at a firm called Mteto and Nyambirai, where I do a whole range of work, but focusing quite a lot on human rights law. Then I'm also a bit of an organizer and an activist in my own right. Although I do believe in the law, I think sometimes as lawyers we're guilty of thinking that the solution to every problem has to be, through legal process. Through legal processes, not saying the opposite of illegal processes, but through going to court, etc. Whereas I think sometimes that's not the case. I think sometimes there are better solutions to some certain problems. So I also work to try and empower ordinary people to resolve problems that they face in their communities through nonviolent action and etc.
And whilst we are on the heads there, I want us to clarify this. Doug, are you a politician?
No, I'm not a politician. I think a lot of people assume that I am a politician. My dad, of course, is a politician, and so people sometimes make that assumption of me. That's not the case. I am a lawyer and an activist. I speak out against a lot of injustices, and because in a country like ours, which is really an authoritarian state, it's the state which is perpetrating a lot of the atrocities and human rights abuses that we see, and we also have this very unhelpful lack of distinction between the state and between the ruling party ZANU-PF. And so sometimes when I and others, in a similar position like me, are calling out the state and ZANU-PF for those human rights abuses and the disrespect that is shown towards the people, that's taken as being a partisan stance. But that's not the case. I've represented people from across the political spectrum, including some of those who are currently in government now, when they were being persecuted towards the end of Mugabe's stay in power. And so, we seek to stand up for the rights of whoever's rights are being violated. It's just that it's quite one-sided as to who is perpetrating the rights violations, and that is primarily the state.
You didn't mention it, but I would also call you a dancer, or at least an aspiring dancer. I saw you on the Jerusalem Challenge, and you did quite well. You did quite well.
No, thanks. Yeah, no, I do love dancing, and I'm lucky that many of my colleagues also enjoy dancing. So we have some good times, dancing.
Yeah. So obviously our conversation today will look at the different hats that you wear, but we're going to focus a bit more, especially on the legal work that you do. Now, becoming a human rights activist and a lawyer, where did this come from? Where does it emanate from? Can you take us through that?
Yeah, sure. I think growing up in a country like Zimbabwe, you really get exposed to a lot of injustices. I mean, it goes back, probably we can say 100 years with the human rights abuses under the colonial regime. Growing up in Bulawayo in particular, of course, the the effects of Kukuluhundi, the atrocities in the 80s, was very real, in that almost everyone who you engage with was affected by in some way, lost a family member, etc. And then, of course, through the 2000s, which was really my sort of the early 2000s was my childhood. I saw the abuses in my hometown by the ZANU-PF government, and I myself, even as a student at school, witnessed firsthand some of those abuses and the persecution of my father, who was involved in opposition politics. As a kid, we sometimes had to go into hiding if people were coming to we got tip-offs that there were attacks on my father, who also experienced a number of attempts on his life. So I think having all these experiences, I really wanted to do something about it. I really wanted to see a Zimbabwe that was more just and respected ordinary citizens, and law felt like one of the ways of doing that. I think because I also grew up in a home where I was exposed to that legal work, I saw how the law could be used as an instrument for justice. So that was really the starting point for me. Then I decided to study law from that standpoint.
And whilst we are still on that point, Doug, there are sections of society within the Zimbabwean context who would say that that's quite rich coming from you, considering your father's background and some of the roles that he took in the past during Rhodesia and during the oppression of our people that is well documented to a certain level and extent. What would be your response to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that certainly my dad has to take responsibility and has taken responsibility for his role in that era. Of course, it's a role that has been exaggerated by his opponents, his politicians, who have called him a Selous scout, which he never was. But nevertheless, he did have a role as a young man, a 17-year-old, in the police, which he was recruited to. But nevertheless, he did serve in the police, and the police were an instrument of oppression at that time, in many ways, to how the police are used as an instrument of oppression now. And that is something which he has to certainly take responsibility for, and he has apologized for, which I, as his son, have encouraged him to do, because certainly those colonial atrocities and the abuses and the discrimination of that era are something that really are at the root of the problems that we still experience today. And so I think both for him but I can speak for myself, because I can't speak for him. But for myself, I think in large part, a lot of what I do is in fact informed by my own understanding and realization that a lot of the oppression that we see today, is really an extension of that colonial system, that colonial system of oppression and extraction of resources for the benefit of a tiny elite. Who that elite is has changed, but it's still the masses who are being oppressed and an elite who is benefiting. And those roots are in the colonial system. So a large part of what I do is because I recognize that there is a responsibility in a way, particularly as white Zimbabweans, to play our role in actually dismantling the colonial system that our forefathers, in a sense, actually set up, and which have never really been dismantled post-independence.
We want this conversation is about you today. It's just some of these things because we were going past through there. We just wanted, but we don't want to dwell on that. In short, but I just have interest in, can you take me into a room when you and your dad speak about such things? How does this conversation go? Is it about you pointing fingers at him and him taking a defensive role, or how does this go?
He obviously has, of his own accord, really, I mean, he has really had a transformation in his life. I mean, I think it really, the pinpoint for him was after his time serving in the police. He went to university in South Africa, and there he became a Christian, and I think that faith really transformed him, and he realized in a way, the error of his ways as a young man, participating in a system that was discriminatory. And so, to a large degree, he has come to that to that realization himself, and of course he has dedicated the last sort of 40 years of his life towards benefiting the vast majority of Zimbabweans, both through his work as a human rights lawyer, where he defended a lot of ZAPU leaders during the Kukurundi, and of course, as a politician and most recently as education minister. So I think it's not like it's a conflict between us. Of course, as a younger generation, maybe we see things more, and our role in a way is to push the older generation to really see things. So on some things such as as topics of white supremacy, we've had some engaging discussions on that, and really understanding how white supremacy as an ideology was really at the root of that Rhodesian regime. So it's more of a dialogue and a conversation.
You chose to study law, to go into law. Where did you study? Can you take us through that journey?
I studied law at the University of Cape Town. I really enjoyed my time there. It was a great time. It's where I kind of started to cut my teeth as an activist as well, realizing the role that ordinary citizens can play to exert power. I was involved in both student activism in terms of issues on campus, there in terms of the crime issues and the university's response after a friend of mine was killed. We organized massive marches around that, and then as well in terms of the Zimbabwean issues. And really trying to develop a core group of students in South Africa who were willing to come back to Zimbabwe to contribute towards bettering our society, and some really fruitful relationships came out of that. And so after I finished my degree, I came back to Zimbabwe, wrote my conversion exams here, and practiced for a short while with a firm. And then I went into the diaspora again for a number of years, while my wife, who got a scholarship to pursue her master's, I accompanied her to the United States. And then we came back to Zimbabwe again in 2017. And a big part of our coming back, we had always intended to come back, but a big part of our coming back was, on the back of the This Flag movement in 2016, and there was a real sense of citizen agency, and we wanted to I really wanted to be a part of that. Came back in 2017, and have been practicing law here ever since.
You go to UCT, you study law. Maybe before we pass that, any names that are in the streets that we know now that you studied with?
No, probably not. The one name that you might recognize is Dr. Justice Mavedzenge. He's a lawyer who has now pursued academia. He and I wrote a book soon after we finished at university, on Zimbabwe's constitution, which we published together. He was pursuing his master's at the same time I was doing my LLB. There were a few other Zimbabweans who studied with me there at UCT, but I think probably most of them are not on the streets, so to speak.
Okay. Now let's come to you moving from South Africa back to Zimbabwe, doing your board exams. I know we hear of a lot of young Zimbabweans who study in South Africa, law specifically, or other countries, but they struggle to come back and assimilate or to go through the exams. And, how did you manage to do it? And, what can others manage to do it? Did your dad write the exam for you? What happened?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I think I was very lucky that on both times that I returned, I had very supportive law firms that I joined, which was very helpful. I think the conversion exams. Some people do find them daunting, but I don't think there's any reason for anyone to be daunted by them. If you've passed your law degree, there's no reason why you shouldn't pass those conversion exams. Zimbabwean law is not that different to certainly not to South African law, and even other jurisdictions. It's not that different. And so, yeah, I think it's really just a case of putting your mind to it, making that decision to come back, and then knocking out those exams. But yeah, it's quite doable, I would say.
Okay, and then now let's talk about the work that you are doing now with Brian Mtetwa and partners. How does it work? Does one needs to be prepared to represent the opposition to work there, or how does this work? Because most of the publicized cases, let me use that term, is we see you mainly with regards to opposition politics.
Yeah, no. So, well, I should say, as a firm, I mean, the firm does a whole wide range of work that you might not see in the press. Corporate work as well, which might not get the same amount of publicity. And we have a whole range of clients. But when it comes to those cases, in terms of the human rights work, which we do quite a lot of human rights work, we really represent whoever's rights are being violated, and it probably wouldn't be proper for me to be dropping names, etc., of clients, but those cases are in the public domain. At the tail end of Mugabe's era, we represented people who are now in government. And so we represent those whose rights are being violated. The reality is that the majority of those whose rights are being violated are perceived critics of the state, be they journalists or trade unionists, or at times opposition politicians. But those are the ones who are being prosecuted and whose rights are being violated. And so, where we are instructed to represent them, we do so.
Yeah, and that brings us as well to another factor where majority of the times when you are representing a certain section of society, specifically opposition or people that have had some certain politically related challenges with the law, there's an issue of being labeled or being called that you've got something to do with regime change. You've got something to do with working with the West. You've got something to do with being financed by external forces trying to destabilize the country. And you have spoken about your history where you studied out of the country, you come back, you work a bit, you go overseas, specifically to the West, and then you come back at the ripe time of 2017. As we go as well, we continue to go into 2018. How would you respond to this kind of comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think people who don't want to respond to the substance of your argument will always try to attack the person, or to attack the imagined person behind the person. And it's even easier to attack a person behind a person because there's you don't even have to prove that they're there. You just make the allegation. I mean, I think that there's this this fascination, or with regime change, as the state likes to put it, which in the majority of democratic countries around the world happens all the time, and that's through elections. It's a very normal process in most countries other than our own. But unfortunately, in Zimbabwe, we have this political elite that is so entrenched and believes that they are the sole ones who have any entitlement to governing, that any threat to that hold on power, whether that is an opposition party contesting an election, or even just a journalist who is reporting on corruption in the state, which they perceive as being a threat to their stranglehold on power, then that is perceived as being a regime change plot, and they're trying to have them overthrown. And so they start coming up with these imaginations.
But do you also agree that there are also certain things that happen that do not help the cause? Like, for example, you spoke about coming back to Zimbabwe in 2017 at the back of this flag movement. When one looks at this flag movement, and when this, reasoning has been used to peddle that, the fact that, Pastor Ivan, after rallying people and people supporting him, he then went, overseas, then it adds to that perception, regardless of all other factors that maybe might be affecting the situation at the hand.
Yeah, look, I think if we take the Pastor Ivan case, certainly, he received a lot of criticism for that. But I think what a lot of people forget when they attack someone like Pastor Ivan is the immense trauma that he and his family went through, and he's not the only one who has gone overseas. Many others have done so, and he, the things that he experienced and the threats which were made against him and his family. I think it's hard for any of us to sit in our armchair from afar and criticize without actually being put through the same. If we look at liberation struggles around the world, even our own those who are in government here, at some point they
had to go out.
The countries. If we look at South Africa, the leadership of the ANC during the struggle was actually in exile. Many of them were in Western countries. Some of them at some point, were in the frontline states. It's not an unusual thing when there is the level of persecution and atrocities which are perpetrated against anyone who stands up for the state. I don't think it's a surprising thing that from time to time people might go out and come back. As for people going out to get an education and come back, for that to then be criticized as I don't know, disloyalty to the state or something. I think that's it's a bizarre criticism because it's actually it's a good thing, I think, for citizens of any country to spend some time going to other countries. That's why they have exchange programs, even
because they go and gain skills there and bring the skills home.
Exactly. You can go and benefit, learn things from how other societies do things and bring them home. So I think that a lot of those are just imaginations and are really used as an excuse so that you don't have to deal with the real substance of the issues that people are raising. You know what I mean? The fact of the brutality, the fact of the corruption, the fact that our people 40 years after independence are still living in abject poverty while a tiny elite has exploited all of the national resources for their own benefit. Those are difficult answers questions that they don't have answers to. And so instead you run to the easy narrative of someone is sponsoring you to make these statements, which is absurd.
And talking about that, you yourself have a few times been arrested. We've seen you going to prison a few times, or be it cells, excuse me, I might use the terms wrongly, be it prison, jail, or cells. And one begs the question and to ask the question, and you have given, like we have talked about the example of Pastor Van and other, situations like that. What then keeps one with the drive to keep going, knowing the level of threat to your life or those around you, and knowing what could potentially happen?
Yeah. I mean, if I speak for myself personally, I think a lot of the drive that I have, and the sort of the confidence I have to continue despite the threats, is really grounded in my faith. I'm a Christian and believe, number one, that God has called His people to stand up for justice, to speak out for those who are downtrodden, and so a lot of the work that I do is really an outworking of that. But number two, I believe that once your life is well, once you're saved and you've put your faith in Christ, that you can't lose your life. Someone can kill the body, but you can't lose your life. And so to that degree, it gives an amazing sense of confidence that there is literally nothing that those who wish to do evil to me can really do to me in an ultimate sense of the word. Of course, there's horrendous things that can be done, and so it's important to take to mitigate that risk. And I do mitigate that risk in a number of ways. I take necessary precautions. I make sure that everything I do is always in terms of the law and the Constitution. I'm an advocate of nonviolent action, nonviolent resistance. Partly because there is statistically, you look around the world, there's less likely of mass atrocities where protesters engage in nonviolent action, but also because I deeply believe that it is actually more effective at achieving the goals that citizens set out to achieve. I take a number of other precautions, which maybe I shouldn't disclose because then I'll. These are things that to some extent you have to count the cost. You have to say this is a risk that we face, and you have to evaluate. At some point, you might say, the risk is too great. I need to spend some time outside of the country in exile. As we've discussed about, and I have no qualms with people who reach that point and feel that they need to take some time out. I wouldn't call anyone a coward for leaving Zimbabwe. As having experienced some of the brutality of this regime, nothing to the extent of some others. Certainly, I would never call anyone a coward for feeling that they need to step back. But I think, it's kind of an individual decision that each person needs to make for themselves. But of course, if we don't fight for a better Zimbabwe, then we'll never get a better Zimbabwe. If we don't actually, as a nation, decide that yes, we need to do what it takes to win our freedom, then we'll never attain it. And so to that degree, we have to press on.
Yeah. And now also still with the work that you do and with the law, can you give us some highlights of what you can say of the short career? I believe you still have a long career ahead of you. What are the highlights that you'd say these have been the highlight of my career so far in terms of cases and things like that?
Yeah, sure. I've been lucky to participate in a number of quite exciting cases. Um, um, in the lead up to the election, I was involved in a number of cases which really sought to try and create a more free and fair environment for the election. One of those cases, of course, was the schools case, which was sought to protect children from exploitation by political parties, in particular ZANU-PF, which was the primary perpetrator of forcing children to their rallies and forcing teachers to their rallies. That one we won in the High Court, and we won two cases in the High Court, which managed to protect teachers and children for a large section of the campaign. Unfortunately, that matter was overturned in the Supreme Court, which is a real pity, because it was a very progressive judgment of the High Court, which was hailed by the United Nations for the stance that it took on protecting children's rights. So there are those frustrations, there are those setbacks.
Yeah, sorry, Doug. Whilst you are there, I don't want us to pass this example before we engage on the fact of saying, on the question to hear your view. To what extent is it worth it to keep fighting using the law where the judge and the juror is one?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and look, it's one that I have to be careful in how I answer.
If you're not comfortable to answer that question, we can pass it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I can answer it how I can answer it. In that, I appear before our courts on a regular basis, and can be held in contempt of court. And there's no doubt that we do face challenges, and that the judiciary, I believe that there are even there are some good judges in our judiciary who want to do the right thing. But there's no doubt that we do face challenges with regard to the independence of the judiciary, and that that pressure is at times brought to bear, and so it's this is it's a difficult question, and one that I have to keep asking myself every day. But when I was studying law at UCT, one of my lecturers by the name of Professor Hugh Corder, he taught us kind of the history of South African law, and one of my favorite courses, he examined the role of very innovative lawyers and judges during the apartheid era, who used the law to just open up a little bit of space here and there, to keep fighting, to keep just protecting people's rights wherever you can. And they were working within a fundamentally unjust legal system. I mean, apartheid is probably one of the most evil legal systems mankind has ever known. And yet, what I found so inspiring was how those lawyers and judges still managed to use the law to chip away. Now, was the law the only way that they chipped away at that? Of course not. What eventually brought the end of apartheid was mass action from trade unions and the United Democratic Front and international solidarity, and a combination of all these factors was what ultimately brought democracy to South Africa. So that's why I say at the beginning, I'm a lawyer and I believe in the law, but I don't believe that the law is like the only thing that we should focus on. We need to fight these struggles on multiple fronts. But certainly the law is an important one. And I mean, maybe, if I touch on some of the other cases where I have defended people whose rights have been violated, there you have no choice, right? It's one thing to go to the court, which people might perceive as being compromised. It's another thing when you or your client is dragged to court in a criminal matter, and they have no choice but to be before that that court. And that's where, as defense lawyers, we do have a critical role to play, whatever we think of the courts. And I have been privileged to have been involved in criminal trials where, despite these challenges, I've managed to secure the acquittal of my clients, and that's a very gratifying feeling.
And you spoke about the run towards the 2018 election, and I think before I go to the next question, let me start here. Post-election, did you play any role in the cases that followed the election with regards to the election?
Oh, yes. So I did play a role in the presidential petition. I didn't play a primary role in that, but I was engaged to play a number of roles. The primary role that I played in that election petition was interviewing a number of polling agents who had been abused. Some had been beaten up using poles, and I witnessed firsthand, people with broken legs. In one of the most horrific incidences, a woman who was a polling agent and her husband were both raped for refusing to change V11 forms, and so I was involved with the compilation of or conducting some of those interviews and compiling and assisting with compiling affidavits.
And I want to
affidavits at court. So there was the famous picture of me carrying
don't preempt my question. Don't preempt my question, because the reason why I asked that question is because I want to come to the famous picture.
Yes.
Because one begs this question of saying, we were told there's thousands of V11s, there's thousands of documentary evidence, but the ordinary man doesn't see these thousands of documentary evidence emerging in the case. What was going on? Were you guys doing some photo ops? Or what happened? What really happened?
Sure. Well, look, I mean, I should say that, as I say, my role was fairly minor in that case. I wasn't at that level of
you were not at the fulcrum of the pith.
Yeah. But what I can say is that the V11s were really, in many ways, were a misnomer. That wasn't really at all the as Tabani said, the fulcrum and the pith of Chamisa's argument, and that was for very good reason. Number one, because of what I spoke about earlier, there was massive issues around the collection of the 11s, in part due to to these abuses which were taking place across the country.
Sorry, Doug. I want you to continue there, but I just want, because I don't want to lose the trail of this, because this is something that a lot of people don't understand, a lot of ordinary Zimbabweans. Mm-hmm. When people were being riled up to support this petition, it was on the basis that we have V11s that are going to support the case. So I think a lot of people, by hanging on to that, they might have not now understood later on Tabani explaining. But when the political message was being said, it was based on this evidence. And that's what made the V11 term become so popular, and it became colloquial in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I certainly take that point. And I think it's more of maybe a PR point than a legal point, in that maybe the PR around how the case was managed could have been done better. And I think the focus on the V11s at the time was to try and at least there were some citizen initiatives to try and gather V11s, to try and get a better picture. But what I really, there's a couple of points that need to be made. One is that, and this is across the world in terms of the obligation for to produce documentary evidence like that is on the person who it is deposited with. And it is an absolute travesty that case went through and ZEC were able to come to court and merely make allegations without actually producing they are the ones who had all of those
the V11s, the documentation.
But I think the important thing is it's not just the V11s, it's the V23s as well. They had that documentary evidence and failed to place it before the court to actually demonstrate categorically what the position was. But I think
but the failure to produce those in terms of the opposition, obviously not speaking from a legal perspective, because there's winning a legal argument and then there's winning in the court of public opinion, which is very critical when it comes to politics. You would agree with me that did some form of damage to the organization, to the opposition.
Yeah, I think that the failure to manage that PR aspect and actually the aspects of the case that the case really was based on, I think were strong in their own right, and there should have been more PR around that. There was an affidavit in there from the same expert opinion, the same expert witness who was instrumental in overturning the Kenyan election result, the Kenyan election, where he was analyzing the ZEC's own results and demonstrated massive inconsistencies in ZEC's own results. Look, this was a number of years ago, but I recall, there being tens of thousands more votes in the presidential election than in the parliamentary election, without any explanation. There were thousands of results which were absolutely identical, where you have every single thing on a form, the exact number of votes going to the exact same candidates, the exact same spoiled ballots, which statistically is impossible. So there were some very strong aspects to that case, and that judgment and the approach taken in that judgment has been criticized even by other courts, such as the Malawi's Constitutional Court and Supreme Court. But I take the point that I think that there could have been stronger PR around how they navigated the public's perception of that case.
And then moving on from there, still with the work that you do, what can we expect from you in the future? Like I said, I believe you have a very young career that still is yet to blossom and take maybe even much more better shape and form. What can we look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I would love to continue doing the work that I do on multiple fronts. On the legal front, to continue representing those who are oppressed and downtrodden, whose rights are being violated, in the courts of law, but also to empower ordinary citizens to take action wherever they are, creatively, non-violently, but to address the immense challenges that we face in Zimbabwe. And so, that's my hope, is that I'll be able to keep playing the small role that I do play. And I'm a real believer in the fact that everyone has has a role to play, and that it can never be a one-man show. I'm inspired daily by the many Zimbabweans and many Africans all across the continent who are doing incredible things to try and kind of create a better future for all of us. And so I hope to work with as many of those people as I can to try and achieve our goals.
Any incline to the fact that maybe one day we might find your name on the ballot?
I don't know. I mean, not at this stage. But you can never rule these things out. I think for me, it's about a goal that I have, which is to create a better Zimbabwe and a more just and prosperous Africa. And at present, I don't see my role as being or as achieving that through politics. Of course, we need good people in politics. At present, I don't see that being my role. But who knows? At a later stage in life, I might feel that I might be most effective, throwing my hat in the ring and getting involved in the political arena. So I can't rule that out. But we'll see where God takes me.
Yeah, and then still just on the Zimbabwean politics, we seem to find a stalemate to a certain extent. Of course, different people will view it differently today. What do you think is the solution to the current Zimbabwean situation?
Yeah, I mean, that really is the $1 million question. And I think it's one that...
Is it another coup? Is it another coup?
Well, I think that one I can answer very directly and very straightly that absolutely not. I think it's another coup is certainly not an answer, and a coup is never really the answer. I mean, maybe I can address this. In 2017, when the coup happened in Zim, I was among a number of citizens. There were a lot of people found themselves in two camps: those who were sort of just strongly in favor and those who were strongly against. And I found myself with a number of others in a position where I recall before the march, we came up with three messages. One being Mugabe must go. Number two was yes to a new Zimbabwe, and number three was no to military rule. And the third one was primarily because we really understood the dangers of what a coup can bring, and we have seen those play out. We have seen the militarization of the state. But I think my feeling about November 2017, and I'm getting to your question about where do we go from here, is that the mistake that we made in 2017 wasn't that citizens went out onto the streets to say Mugabe must go, because Mugabe was an illegitimate president anyway. He had remained in power through rigging elections, etc. And so he was an illegitimate president anyway. But so the problem was not that people went out to say Mugabe must go. It was that after going out, people simply went home and said, we'll leave it to the military and to ZANU-PF to navigate their own in-house things, and we just went home, right? Yeah. And it's no surprise at all that we have a situation where there was merely a changing of the guards and nothing really changed. Now, myself and a number of other citizens tried our best for that not to happen. For citizens to stay on the streets and demand a proper transition to a democratic state with the implementation of real reforms, the demilitarization of the state, and that didn't happen.
But do we
I
see
think therein lies the potential for future change? If you see what happened, for example, in Sudan, where citizens came out on the streets non-violently and said, we are demanding a change. And when the military removed al-Bashir and installed themselves, in very similar circumstances to ours in November 2017, the citizens remained on the streets and said, no, we want a total transformation. And after citizens, through citizens exercising their power, they managed to bring those in power to the negotiating table and managed to negotiate a transition through dialogue. So yes, I'm very in favor of dialogue. And I believe that ultimately the crisis in Zimbabwe will be resolved through genuine dialogue, where everything is on the table and agreement and consensus can be reached about how do we really collectively get out of the problem that we find ourselves in. But I'm of the view that there has to be a point before that, because there's such a power imbalance between those who are in power and the ordinary citizens who are disempowered, that citizens need to build their power through exercising their rights to engage in collective nonviolent action. And so that's what I believe is the precursor to us having genuine dialogue, which can bring about ultimate change.
The citizens didn't wake up and say, we are going to remove Robert Mugabe. There was a machinery that was already at play. And the situation was ripe, so that Mugabe, as a dancer, he had stayed in the circle for too long. So when you stay inside the circle for too long, even if you're a very good dancer, at some point everyone says, let's remove this guy so that we can also dance in the middle of the so that's it's just to share some sentiments that some people have. And
I mean, just to comment on that, I would totally agree with you on that front, that in November 2017, the people of Zimbabwe were certainly used, and to a large degree, as you say, that was because people were not strategic and allowed themselves to be used. But I think in every and any situation, there are multiple things at play, and just in as much as we as citizens were used, we could have, though we failed to, we could have used something initiated by the military to bring about a democratic transition. And I think that needs to be the lesson that citizens draw from that, is that the next time a transition moment comes around, citizens need to have a clearer understanding of, number one, what we really want, right? In terms of what do we really want? Number two, how do we get there? And number three, and most critically, because I think this is what is lacking in a lot of us as Zimbabweans, is the power that we hold as citizens when we work together. And I think we saw a glimpse of that in 2017. We saw a glimpse of that in 2016, and I really believe that when citizens really make that have that understanding and that consciousness and then act on it, that's when we will ultimately see a democratic change in Zimbabwe.
Now, just on the other side, as we wrap this up, Doug, you become president today. You are asked to put together a cabinet. Give me a list of your 5 critical ministries, say, for argument's sake, health, education, finance, home affairs, vice presidents. Who are you going to group around you? Essentially, I'm trying to come to the point of saying, who do you think is the future of Zimbabwe if we were to look at it, or maybe not necessarily the future, but the people that you'd say, you'd put confidence to say, if leadership changes, these are the people that can lead us to the promised land?
I think you're trying to make a politician out of me.
And remember, we said we were not closing that door.
Yeah, no. Look, I mean, there are certainly some very competent people across the board. And look, I think I would probably want to avoid naming names, just because it can.
No. But you're not being fair. You're not being fair. No, we are working with a hypothetical.
Yeah. Yeah. You really want to push me on this one?
Yeah, please. Look, you are. I regard you as a Zimbabwean youth, and as the youth, one of the things that we need to come to terms with is the fact that we are allowed and we should dream. Mm-hmm. You are a Christian man, and even the Word of God says, "Young men shall see visions." So when we can't envisage certain things, and when we want to steer so much far away from them, they just get further and further away. And you spoke about when the coup happened, as citizens, we needed to have a mindset of what do we want as our future. And these are conversations we should never shy away from.
Yeah.
And you, as one of the influential young Zimbabweans, I believe you have a role to play, and your perspective is an important one. But this is a hypothetical.
Yeah, no, I think I'm not going to be drawn on this one. But what I can say is that I think the focus needs to be less about individuals and which individuals are in place, and more about creating a system that allows those individuals to actually thrive. I think we have seen that even we've really seen how that has been demonstrated, in the current government, where there might be some people who have certain competencies who have been, appointed to various positions, but because the system as it currently is set up is not designed to allow people to actually do what's in the interests of the ordinary citizen. The entire system is designed, number one, in order to oppress. Number two, in order to extract resources for the benefit of the few. That anyone who pushes against that gets sidelined, gets pushed out. I mean, a good example of that, of course, is a couple of decades ago with Nkosana Moyo. When he tried to draw the line, he was pushed out. And so I think it's a mistake for us to put too much emphasis on individuals. Certainly, there are many competent individuals in healthcare and in the legal fraternity and in education and business. There are so many, but the problem is that the system doesn't allow for those things to work. So, if you want me to cast a vision for where we're going, or what I would want done, certainly that is something I can do. On the legal front, we have to repeal these oppressive laws which have their roots in the colonial system. This new version of Posa Mopa is just as oppressive as Posa was. And the reality is that the most oppressive laws are actually contained in the criminal code, not even in Mopa or Posa. Those ones need to be repealed, and that's the easiest thing in the world to do. When it comes to education and healthcare, the key thing is that we have to empower our personnel to be able to deliver. We're not paying our teachers. We're not paying our doctors. We're not providing medicines in our hospitals because that money is being looted. Those are the structural issues that we need to deal with, and to some extent, if you deal with those structural issues, the person who you have ultimately at the top of each ministry, yes, you would want a competent people, but there's so many different competent people who could fill that role. And to some extent, it wouldn't matter who that person is once you deal with those structural issues.
I actually think your potential political career looks bright, because this is one of those questions where you showed that that the politician seed is there in you, and over and above that, the law, the being lawyer part of it worked. But you make a very good point, and this is something that actually is very important as well for us as young people to focus on, to understand the fact that our hopes should not lie in people, but our hopes should lie in systems that we would want to develop, and ideals in which we want to find ourselves in. We will wrap up now, Doug. You proudly mentioned that you're Christian, you're from a Christian background. Do you have any involvement in the church?
Yeah, I do, just in my local church, and you know, I'm an active member of my local church and play a sort of small leadership role there, and I do try to engage with the broader church as well. I'm a real believer in the power of the church to play a radical transformational role throughout the world, but even in Zimbabwe to play an important role in bringing about a better Zimbabwe. And so so I do try to engage where I can with church leaders, and to try to encourage where I can church leaders and ordinary congregants to take up that mantle that I really believe God has called us to take up.
Africa-wide, Baobab Chats, you know, we have people following Baobab Chats and contributing from across the continent. Any current African leaders that you might say you admire, or that you say they inspire you, especially young leaders?
Yeah, sure. Many to talk about. I think both past and present. You know, if I look at past leaders and you know, many of whom were young in their prime. You know, leaders like Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, who were young men when they took up leadership roles and really worked to try and transform their countries. Now, you know, if I look across the continent, there are many inspiring leaders. Perhaps the one which is outstanding is Bobi Wine from Uganda, who has really demonstrated immense courage, but also immense clarity in the role that he is playing in trying to bring about a democratic Uganda. You know, all across the continent, I keep in touch with a number of young leaders who might not be as well known, but who are playing their role in trying to bring about change in their societies. Leaders from Sudanese civil society, from a movement in the DRC called Lucha. Many young people from there who are fighting for change, and this is really where I draw a lot of my inspiration from, and really a lot of hope for our continent.
Doug, we can go on and on. You ooze wisdom, knowledge, experience, and the energy to want to see a better future for all Africans. I would like to thank you for having joined us at Baobab Chats and taking time out of your very busy time to engage with us, to allow us to pick your brain on various issues surrounding us. But mainly, we were also here to celebrate you, celebrate the work that you do, and celebrate and tell you that you're inspiring a lot of Africans across the continent. Thank you so much, Doug.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been good to chat.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Cheers.